Hi, everyone, and welcome to Why You Need a Tech-Forward Supply Chain Management Strategy. Today's webinar is sponsored by Surge Air and produced by Smart Brief. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Smart Brief, and I'm truly excited to be part of this special event. But before we get going, I need to cover some housekeeping items that'll help you get the most out of today's discussion. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. At the end of the discussion today, we're going to have a dedicated Q&A session to discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you asked, so keep them coming throughout the event today. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A, and we will provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find some important resources, including a PDF of the Surge Air Company Prospectus for 2024. You'll also find a link to the Events Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events just like this one. And finally, at the end of this webinar event, we're going to make one of you $250 richer in the form of an Amazon gift card. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of the prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the super boring details there. And with that, folks, why don't we get to the main event? It is my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator today, Susan Rush, an editor and moderator with Smart Brief. Now, I'll be popping in after their discussion to give away that gift card, so I'll see you on the other side. Susan, you have the virtual floor.
Thanks, Keith. So I'm Susan Rush, as Keith said. I'm Director of Content here at Smart Brief. I focus on our technology, marketing, and retail sectors. I'm really excited about our discussion, and I feel very lucky to have an incredible industry expert with us today. I'd like to introduce Bill Wappler, CEO of Surge Air. Bill, hello, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Hi, Susan. And for those that have joined us, thank you. And I look forward to the conversation. I would suggest that with supply chain being so complex nowadays, look in the window of who Surge Air is just about as complex. If you look at us at a very thin, get to know you handshake level, really, we're all about building AI-powered, frictionless supply chains. However, that's quite a statement. And that introduces topics like, well, we happen to be a SaaS-based software company. We also use a lot of IoT so that we are gathering data at an incredibly high accuracy level, somewhere over 99.998%. We use that then to provide visibility through supply chains. And in order to do that, we also then deploy a cadre of engineers that build solutions and then ensure that we're deploying the visibility that our clients need. So that's a bit, but that really, from the first level of introduction through who we are, kind of gets us started.
Yeah, I agree. It's really nice to meet you, Bill, and I think you've set an interesting foundation for our talk today around supply chain management and technology. The approach to traditional supply chain management is obviously changing, fueled in large part by disruptive technologies like AI, as you mentioned, IoT, big data, and others. Technology innovations are helping supply chain managers rethink everything from logistics, factory sourcing, and control of manufacturing to foster supply chain agility. Today, Bill and I hope those of you listening in to help discover how tech can help future-proof operations and when you meet unexpected occurrences in your business. Bill, let's get into it.
Let's do.
Great. What do you see as the key trends and challenges in supply chain management right now?
The key trends in supply chain management are that there are no key trends.
I love it.
If you were to look at our clients, and many of us would recognize them, they're some of the biggest names doing business globally. Here's what we're learning. First of all, we're learning that supply chains are a ever-changing business environment. So those of us that have been around for a while remember that companies would have a multitude of suppliers. Then we went through a period, and the wisdom of the time was, let's narrow it down to very few, if not single, levels of suppliers so that we would build relationships, have a stronger game, and support each other's business. We have found that everything from natural disasters to government policy to a lot of other impediments to that philosophy have moved us now over to well, wait a minute, we should not only think of multiple suppliers, but we should think about them geographically. We should think about them in a lot of ways we've never done. So you take that, now you have supply people that are much busier than they've ever been. And then what do? You run a very large vessel into a bridge in Baltimore, right? And that changes then the trend that they've been working on, and the comfort level they had just went upside down. Before that, we saw tsunamis in Japan. We've seen freezing weather in Houston. We've seen lots of different things that make a complex supply chain ever more complex. And as a result of that, it's very, very difficult to trend that out.
But I think what I hear you say, maybe an overarching trend is disruption. Just be ready for it. Yeah. So one thing I'd like to say to our audience, as Bill and I are chatting, please, again, as Keith mentioned, submit some questions for Bill. And we will try to address them either throughout the event or during our dedicated Q&A session. I just wanted to pop that in there one more time so no one forgets. But Bill, I'm wondering what you think it means to have a tech-forward approach to supply chain management.
So let's if we can start to dissect the challenges that those of us in supply chain see. As I said before, we have distance that we're trying to overcome, and the challenges of moving product over a much greater distance than we have in the past. Mm-hmm. We have some governmental policy issues that we're trying to overcome. We're doing that in a time where resource challenges are very prevalent. That is then causing havoc with processes that we've all gotten comfortable with. And so, as we look at our clients, what the answer always comes out to be is step one is visibility. All of them are saying, hey, look, we need to change the way we not only deliver, but the way we manufacture, the way that we are relating to our clients. Those relationships need to improve. We need to improve the relationships with the end user client, right? That's part of the supply chain. So all of those, if you dissect them, can really only be attacked, if you will, and then dissected and improved if you have visibility. If you don't, then first of all, you don't know where to work. You don't know if what you're doing is yielding the results that you would like. And more importantly, as we brought up at the very last, you don't know then how you're going to impact the client experience, which, as I said, at the end of the day, it really is all about that. That's why supply chain exists. So for us, it's very simple. In order to overcome the challenges, you start with visibility. Visibility can only come through technology, and that then becomes the answer. And there are so many people that are adopting the strategy of AI is going to change our world. There's no doubt about it. Um, Supply chain disruption is going to be ever present. We see it every day of our lives. And we know that in order to be able to accomplish using AI in a positive way, we also have to have a technology foundation to do that. So it becomes very clear that our future resides on a tech forward supply chain initiative. Overcoming current challenges results from visibility, which demands a tech forward initiative. So everyone has kind of embraced that as a overall strategy. Really, it becomes a question of, for each individual company, where do you get started, not if you do.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And I think it's also important you mentioned, relationships. You're using that technology to build relationships with your clients and your vendors. And I think that's really important as we go through this discussion to remember that as well. And just talking a little bit, like building a bit on what you were saying, how technology can influence efficiency and effectiveness of supply chain operations. How do you think it helps build overall resilience for companies?
Resilience. So another one of our favorite words nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Resilience, we have to also think about what that term means a little bit, and then I think we can probably speak in greater detail. But there are lots of different types of resilience, right? Are we resilient in the marketplace? We can just start there. So it reminds me of a business solution that we're building now for one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world. Resilience to them is we have to be able to change our entire product set depending on what the types of preferences that the individual has, right? I'm sending young kids to school today. They're not preferring this type of snack. They're preferring another type of snack. That turns everything upside down. Resilience then in the marketplace suggests you need to be able to understand that, move quickly, right? And then be able to manufacture, distribute maybe an entirely different product. In that instance, then, resilience is all about staying ahead of a changing market, which changes faster all the time, and being able to keep up with that change in a very complex environment. Resilience can also be, how do I survive the changes that we know are coming, right? And that may be, we've been producing so much of our product in Asia that's now going into Latin America. Resilience can certainly be a discussion around, how am I going to make that happen, remain profitable, remain in a place where my supply chains are working effectively, right? So there's that whole part of resilience too. And then I think it starts coming back to resilience in the complexities of business as a whole. And now we start drifting into the business climate of profitability and being maintained as a strong brand. All those types of things introduce a conversation about resilience as well. I bring all those up because if you think about it, in the middle of all of those discussions is supply chain. Supply chain, in many cases, and it goes even back as many years as to the book that one of our past presidents, Bill Clinton, wrote about saving the world with supply chain. Well, that's an interesting metaphor because it also means saving business through supply chain.
Mhm.
So the supply chain is the only thing that really is going to make us faster in that part of resilience. It's the only thing that will allow us to adopt to new market realities, Asia to Latin America. Supply chain is the only thing that is going to make that successful. And at the end of the day, then, that would suggest that profit, valuation, all of those types of business issues, then it's incumbent on those companies then to focus on supply chain. If they're doing that, they're introducing technology.
Yeah, I love how you really looked at the word from different angles. And it is interesting to see, supply chain has always been key, right? But it was never, for many people, it wasn't top of mind, outside of the people who were running the operations. And I think with over the way the world has changed, it's really become more top of mind and an important piece in all areas of business. So I'm wondering, just talking about how, maybe some specific technologies that you think are reshaping supply chain management and kind of enhance what you were talking about, visibility and that collaboration.
Sure. And again, if I may, we'll start to kind of break that down into different
Of
different
course.
segments, because once again, let's just think about then the problem that comes to mind with your question, and that is, okay, let's just capture what supply chain does with their day. Because, and it wasn't so long ago that business moved at a pace that allowed supply chain practitioners to be lots of things other than what they are today, which is generally speaking, they're firefighters. Because their days start with what problems do I have to solve when I sit down with my first cup of coffee? And then am I going to survive the day and set us up to go do this again tomorrow, right? And that has changed through so many different business theories. One of them being, as an example, we don't keep much stock, if you will, or assets within the four walls anymore. When I was younger, what would you do? Well, you'd have contingency stock. If I couldn't, right? If I couldn't believe that I was going to have everything I needed every day on time, then I would have some designated stock so that I could ensure that we could manufacture and deliver what we needed. Because at the time, the only thing that was important was our end user, who was going to buy the product, and we wanted to make darn sure they were going to have it. So we had stock. Well, now then we start thinking about running lean, right? And we lean out every part of the manufacturing and distribution model. Well, and if you start looking at what the stock exchange follows very closely, it's how, if I look at your balance sheet, what kind of inventory are you carrying? We want to inventory out so that we bring cash and profit up, right? So there's all of those kinds of things that are happening that make the world of supply chain so complex. And I think that if you start there, you start going, okay, well, that means then that in order for me to move in that kind of an environment, and by the way, we're going to do it globally, not just state to state, right? So let's figure that out globally. So you start looking at things like, okay, we have to be able to communicate. So now you're starting to see more and more focus on the networks that are involved. My networks can't go down. Who am I going to rely on? Is Wi-Fi going to do it, or am I going 5G? And when I build out more technology, right, will the internet even at 6E support my traffic? So a lot of people are really looking at the underlayment of communication to get started. So once you have that, then it becomes a, where are my greatest problems in my supply chain? So we start to see then a lot of folks are starting with visibility, like we spoke about, and that is at each point in the supply chain. For us, we really focus on what's happening in the four walls, whether it's warehouse management, production control, what's coming in, what's going out, those types of things. And then we follow then that as it pertains to transportation. And that's a common theme. A lot of people start there. Then they start looking at, how do I increase production? Because there are a lot of companies now that are looking at, okay, well, I don't have the resources that I used to have. How do I balance lack of resources with increased needs and productivity? So we're starting to see a lot of robotics, and that in all of the way we could use that word, right? So whether they're moving product, or whether they're picking, or whether they're loading trucks, there's a lot of focus on robotics, and we see that time and time again. What I am finding to be one of the most interesting aspects of supply chain today, and I am not sure if you're familiar with this, but we have about 15 billion transactions that come through our network every month. So using IoT data, and then using AI to kind of get a sense of what all of that data means, we have a pretty good perspective around the demands placed on what visibility means. And one of the biggest parts of technology that we see growing and burgeoning more and more every day is integration. So people are saying, hey, look, I have to know where everything is. I have to overcome resource challenges. I have to try to increase my production ratios and those kinds of things. But really, and you brought this up earlier, it's that relationship piece that is solving so many problems. With relationships cause the need to integrate. So one of the roles that we're playing more and more is to act as the facilitator of data between relationships that then are feeding our clients' systems. And I have to tell you, Susan, if there's anything that I see as now major trend that you initially brought up, and what tech forward means, it's all about integration, sharing the visibility among a community of users. That is by far, of those 15 billion transactions that are coming through our systems, when we track those down and talk to our users, it's all about integration throughout their community.
Great. And, we could probably have a whole conversation on my next question. But we have to talk about AI. It's the buzzword, and what everyone wants to know about. So how do you see AI, helping advance digital transformation and the supply chain?
Yeah. I do not see AI as Terminator Part 6.
Well, that's good.
We'll start there, right? I don't see AI as writing my final exam to get through business school. I think that many people are drawn to the buzzword that you brought up, and a lot of drama is being fed into that buzzword right now that I think is um, a little foolish, if I may, because it's so early. But I kind of see AI this way. AI is going to look, in my opinion, much like a tree. AI has a beginning. The beginning is just algorithmic methodologies and if then this kinds of logic. We bring that math to equations. We use a lot of different ways then to learn, right? We take all of that learning and then it does one simple thing. It continues.
Mm.
That's it. So when we look at AI and what we use AI for, that's AI agentics, right? Which means we use it as an agent. And AI for us, we have one client, one of the largest manufacturers of automobiles in the world, uses it to capture data from a lot of different areas through our capture IoT devices. They use that data, we put it through AI, and then that determines for them what they're going to ship and when. Now, before that, there were people that were looking at material, there were people that were looking at shipping, there were people that looking at a lot of different pieces of that, and then formulating their own personal strategy, if you will, around what they know should happen. Now take that person out and replace it with AI, and we're doing the same thing. Only what's happening is over time, we're using math and information to replace then the decision making. So for our client, that OEM, that automotive manufacturer, um, they had people that were looking at all of those different pieces of information, making a decision in a way the truck goes, right? They build the truck and away it goes. Um, AI can help by doing this. It has a greater memory, right? It knows trends better than people because remember, with machine learning, it's looking at trillions of books a day. That's how it can absorb all that information. So it's going to have a greater memory. It will know more, and then it will be able to mathematically then come up with a better solution than if you and I did it manually. So that really is where we see AI in the business world, and specifically toward supply chain. Everybody will go there. We may as well just get to the point that AI is going to be everywhere and it's going to help us do many of those types of tasks in every business that there is, and it will change supply chain, but it's going to change it for the better because it won't have to pick up a phone and call a supplier to say, hey, look, I have to change my production schedule and I don't have your parts. Where are they? Right? AI will be able to search using visibility and technology tools. It will search all of those variables and it will have already made a decision for you, will inform you of what that decision is, and then you can check mark that box and it moves along. So it's really, when I say agentics, the use of an AI agent, what I'm really saying, it's doing all of our homework for us, and it asks you to check your homework, and then business goes on. So that's the way we see AI. I kind of like the Terminator. I think that's pretty cool, but I don't see the Terminator helping me with my supply chain.
Yeah, or taking your job, right? And I think that's a really interesting point. You know, some people are thinking it more of the Terminator or termination of them, which really just you want to look at it from the more exciting, you know, what if, what are the possibilities? And you know, it's still early enough on that we don't exactly know exactly what will come, but I think just being positive about it, like you are, I think is the way to look at it for sure.
Well, let's
So
go back.
yeah,
If I may, let's go back to your original
of course.
question. Do we look tech forward, right, when we think about our strategy on supply
Mhm.
chain improvement? We all know, everybody knows, that supply chain will be supported by AI agents. That's just a fact. So it would suggest things like, well, yeah, we know we're hyper competitive nowadays, right? We know business is moving faster than it ever has. We know it's so complex that many of people now wonder, to your earlier question, can we remain resilient? The answer to that is yes, and we're going to have AI agents help us do that. You can't get there unless you begin with a tech forward strategy. AI has to have that data, and it has to be truthful data, or it won't work.
You know, I just want to build on kind of everything that you've said so far. Not to put your brain too much on stress, but what do you think are the main challenges that organizations face when they're trying to implement new technologies or taking a tech forward supply chain approach?
Yeah, there are several, and they're pretty big. The first one is that technology is gaining expertise in its own right at a very high velocity. In other words, technology is getting better every day. So the first piece that's difficult is to decide what technology is out there that is most appropriate and is going to get me further in my ambitions. That's quite a challenge. Technology really used to be um, dependent on a few very large companies. And we could all go back in time and we would remember when we were in the first days of our IT experience, we can all tell you the three or four companies that you would have to call if you wanted to get into mainframe or mid-size computing or whatever it was, right? There were only really four major players. Today, what's happening is there are wonderful new technologies that are being born everywhere in the world. There are technologies that are coming out of places like South Africa, Israel, France, Germany. You and I could go on and on and on, right? Norway, it's everywhere. So the challenge of then finding the most appropriate technology is really challenging. And then the next challenge is marrying it all together for a single solution. That's pretty hard. And then let's say that we've been successful with that, right? Now you come to the biggest challenge of all. And that is
So,
not the technology itself. Technology, and by the way, there was a report that was brought out by one of the very large research firms that suggested 74%. Think about that. 74% of the types of initiatives that you and I talk about never scale past pilot. That means they fail. You have a 74% failure rate.
it's
If you
incredible.
look at it, and from what we've seen, the problem is a challenge with people, not a challenge with failed technology. So those are really the big challenges, right? First challenge is, what in the world am I going to use? The second challenge is, how am I going to connect it all together for the right tool. And then the third challenge, which is the biggest challenge, is how do I convert my current staff to a tech-friendly environment? That's pretty hard to do. So when you start talking about do we look at a tech-forward strategy, the answer is yes. You have to because of AI and all the things that we've talked about. The real challenge, though, and I would even suggest this to everyone that might be participating in today's discussion, I would suggest that perhaps your first call internally is to HR. Truly, it's what is the makeup of our organization? How best do we introduce something that is going to have such long-term implications to defining who we are and how we're going to approach business in the future? It isn't that I call the IT guy. I don't really call the purchasing guy. I don't call the executives. In many cases, when we start with our clients, we want to start at the personnel level so that we can believe that not only is there commitment, but there's opportunity to change.
You brought up an interesting point about HR, and I'm wondering how important is leadership buy-in and organizational culture when it comes to adopting technology?
Yeah, well, one thing we all fear is headline leadership, right? And so there has been a lot of conversation and a lot of headlines created about several very important topics. And a lot of companies have signed on. And I will use as an example sustainability. We have a client that makes everything from diesel engines for trucks to large platform engines to support electrical generation, those kinds of things. Great company. I bring them up a lot in our conversations because when you talk to them, they are all about sustainability from the very top to the very last person that touches their product as it goes out the door. And that type of commitment is rare. To take it and make it part of your definition and your soul is very challenging to do, right? And so we are now talking about a change that will be happening to companies that will create the division between what companies succeed in the future and what companies fail. And this is the time where you act like our client, where it doesn't matter what position you hold in that company, from CEO to, like I said, last touch, right? Everybody knows they're all about sustainability. And this is the time really to have that type of commitment. Generally speaking, with technology, the commitment is at the, okay, I'll sign the check, right? That's the commitment. Okay, I'll sign the check. Let's go. And then it starts to go into a dilutionary pattern where, well, it's not as important today because we've got this other contract that's coming due with a third-party logistics company or whatever it is, right? And so it dilutes, and then it dilutes, and then it dilutes. And I think that the companies that we've seen fail, it's not because of lack of commitment in the beginning, it's lack of commitment over time. And that's really, really hard to do. Commitment is everything. Long-term commitment is the only way you can succeed.
That is fantastic. I love that. You're so on point. I want to make sure we have some time for our Q&A. So what are maybe 2 or 3 takeaways you want to make sure everyone leaves with here today before we move on to the Q&A?
So I would just simply say this, that the sun is coming up. It's spring, weather's getting better. And I think that's also a perfect metaphor for business, particularly those that have worked in the supply chain. Lord knows that they have been up against it for a while now. Like I said, whether it's a tsunami that hits Japan, whether it's strikes that have hit Europe, it doesn't matter what the headline of the day is. Supply chain has been a very hard place to work. And I have to say, I respect that profession a great deal. But at the same time, it's a little bit like burnout. You can't just keep going. And supply chain can't continue the way it is. What we're seeing, though, is there's active change happening. The technology's getting better. The strategies are more sound. Commitments are deeper. All those things that we always hoped for are actually happening. So, I was so intrigued by, the topic of today. Why do you need a tech forward supply chain management strategy, right? Well, the answer is short. Well, you have to or die. Right? But the long answer is really hard. And that is, gosh, do people recognize that? Because a lot of times supply chain was just quiet. They were hidden behind the curtain. Magic happened, but it was behind the curtain. And now that it's recognized, and now that there's technology that's being developed to support them, now that they can actually find truthful evidence of what's happening, that visibility, right? Capturing data at 99%. Now they have a true picture of what's going on. And I believe all of that is really going to provide their spring. Now, I hope their golf game is better than mine, because that'll ruin a spring in a hurry. But as a metaphor, to be very candid, we're at maybe one of the most optimistic times in business that I've seen for a while, and it's because of what's coming to supply chain.
That's awesome. Well, let's move to our Q&A. I think you and I could just sit here and chat all afternoon, Bill, but I think we better see what else is out there. So here's a question. Can you share any real world examples or case studies where organizations have successfully implemented tech forward supply chain strategies?
Oh, for sure. We as a company, and it isn't that I want to send everybody to our website, but we're not going to be able to go through all of those companies. But I would suggest that, if you want to look at companies that have done well with integrating technology like ours, you might want to look at Honda. If you want to look at somebody that has an incredible forward thinking tech strategy, I would go to Train. If you want to talk about somebody that is on the front side of development of new technologies, I would go to PepsiCo Labs. If you want to go to someone that is really pushing the boundaries of tracking inbound product and using intelligent labels, those types of things, I'd go to CAT. So we have a lot of different very large clients that are pushing the envelope pretty well. If anybody wants to talk about them, I'm always up for a phone call and a cup of coffee. I can give you much more detail, but I haven't seen the company yet that has been able to onboard all the technologies quite yet. But I do see people, and I'll go back to Honda for a moment. They were the first place we started to deploy AI. They're forward thinking. They're highly integrated. They have something like 94% of their suppliers on board, so they understand the community involvement. They are an incredible company. But having said that, Cummins, you want to talk about sustainability? Go to Cummins. You want to talk about intelligent labels? CAT. And it just keeps going from there. And if anybody wants to talk one-on-one, I'll be more than happy to talk about that.
Great. It looks like we have time for just one more question. This went by so quickly. But in your opinion, what are the critical steps that companies should take to future-proof their supply chain operations through the use of technology?
Future-proofing. Now, that is a long conversation.
We only have a few minutes, Bill. So
okay, I'll say this very quickly. Don't believe in future-proofing. Future-proofing is going to exist through perpetual change. Many people want to commit both financially as well as organizationally to a solution. And solutions, I think my advice would be to consider this. Solutions in technology are iterative. They are not final, ever. So that's where I would start. I would start by saying it's never going to end. It's just going to get better.
Great. I love your positive attitude, Bill. I think it's infectious, and I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion as much as I did today. But we've come toward the end here, so I'm going to throw it back to Keith so he can round us out.
And thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Bill.
And thanks to both of you for a fascinating discussion. Such great stuff there. I learned a ton, which is why one reason I enjoy being on these things so much. With that, folks, we are pretty close to being wrapped here. We do have one more piece of business to take care of, which is the Amazon gift card prize drawing that I mentioned at the top. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card for today is Wendy Sukla from Wisconsin. I hope I pronounced that last name right. Wendy Sukla from Wisconsin. Congratulations to you, Wendy. We will be in touch ASAP to get you your card. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Smart Brief team, I want to thank Surge Air for making this event possible. Thanks, Susan, for leading a discussion that was just absolutely illuminating for me and for the attendees. Thank you, attendees, for being here and for your great questions, folks. That concludes the event. Have a great rest of your day.